Hey, what's up everyone? This is Snackbox. Hope you all are having an amazing day, guys. In today's video, I want to talk about the new mythical champion and Rachel Legends revealed yesterday something we've never seen before, and it is a damage dealer who scales off both resistance and attack. This could completely flip the current arena and PvP meta on its head. And today I'm breaking down exactly how this new mechanic works, who it helps, who it hurts, and why it might be the most disruptive champion release this year. So traditionally, nukers in Raid are based entirely on attack or defense, right?
Am I a joke to you?
The most popular one is Marius. Obviously, you want to have some decent accuracy on him, but in general, his damage scales from defense alone. Obviously, enemy max HP, but his main stat, that you can manipulate, we don't have control over the enemy max HP, but we can have control over the defense. Another one would be, for example, Harima. Then we have, champions like Ninja and so on that scale of attack. And I think we are getting more and more champions that are scaling off two stats, right? The first one ever was probably Rotos, which scales off attack and HP, right? On all of his attacks. I think he was the first one. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he was the first ever with two stats. Then over the time, we got a few more, and with the mythicals and now Carnage, he's probably the most similar one to the mythical that got released in terms of how he's scaling. He's obviously attack based, but he's also scaling from accuracy. Now the new mythical Juan the Luminant is most likely inspired by Jeanne d'Arc, and this champion is scaling off attack and resistance. And resistance really has been, most of the time more like a defensive stat on supports, not really on nukers. There were some niche builds on a Taras, for example, where people build a Taras with like a high resistance build, but in general, it was more a stat for support type champions or, some niche champions that would convert the resistance into accuracy like a Crixia would do, or Galathier in second form, and so on. But other than that, resistance wasn't really interesting on like savage and lethal sets, right? Or combined with damage stats. But now that will change. So now we get a champion that is scaling off attack and resistance. So you essentially create a nuker that is very hard to debuff, becomes tankier in that sense as it becomes stronger too, right? And hits harder. So why does this matter? Well, basically you no longer need to choose between survivability and damage. You basically just scale your damage off the survivability. High resistance gear becomes offensive gear for the first time, right? Scaling off resistance means we're gonna look at our artifacts in a different way, right? I'm pretty sure most of you guys have at least one piece that is, a lethal, from the lethal set, merciless, or even savage that has these stats right here: speed, crit rate, crit damage, and resistance, like this one right here. Let's take a look at this. Every time you roll resistance on a piece like this, you'll be like, man, why? Why did I roll resistance, right? But now it finally has a purpose. We get a champion that is scaling off this stat. Now, obviously, most of the people are probably not going to get this champion, including myself, but you never know. You never know. So for that moment, in case you pull this champion, someday, I don't know, artifacts like this become interesting. And by the way, I also thought I would never pull a Galathier, right? I thought I would never get this champion. And one day I opened my Remnant Summons and boom, there he was, right? So it is possible to get those mythical champions. You just gotta keep playing, keep grinding, and eventually you will get one of them. But even if you don't get this champion, it doesn't really matter too much because I'm pretty sure there's gonna be more champions like this that scale of resistance in the future. So this type of gear has a purpose. I'm pretty sure that's going to be the next step that we're heading to, right? Champions that scale of 2 stats like resistance, accuracy, combined with defense or attack, or even HP like Embrace, right? We have Embrace, which scales of HP and accuracy, but you don't really want to build him with accuracy because that kind of makes him a little bit weaker. But then you have Carnage, which scales a lot from accuracy, and you also need it, right? You need to place the debuffs. Then we had a champion like He-Man, which also, scales of attack and HP like Rotos did. And then one of the most recent ones, besides the new mythical that got released, or that's going to be released by the time the fusion comes live, is Polara. Polara is also scaling of 2 stats, defense and attack. And the one thing you have to consider though is that those champions always scale the most with the first stat that is described here, right? In this case, it is defense. So what I'm trying to say is sets like Stone Skin, resistance substats, and then crit rate, crit damage, or attack, or whatever that champion is scaling it with, become more valuable. Or even resistance main stat chests, right? I'm pretty sure everyone pulled something like this at some point. You do a Cursed City run, and then you get a resistance merciless chest, and you're like, why do I get a resistance chest? Right? It's still a good piece for a support type champion, right? Or Titus. But then again, you would rather have crit damage instead of crit rate on a Titus. And Titus was actually one of the first champions too that gave more value to, resistance artifacts. Because you have to build him with enough resistance so he keeps the buffs, right? He was kind of the first one that really had a big impact on that. And now we got a second champion, which is a mythical, which actually scales damage of resistance. Amazing. This is amazing. And also the champion is absolutely busted. I mean, if you look at this skill alone, right, it's a 4-turn cooldown, but you are, hitting with 3 attacks. You're hitting 3 times. You're ignoring shield, block damage, unkillable. So bolster doesn't help. Block damage doesn't help. Unkillable doesn't help. And you will also ignore 35% defense against targets whose resistance is lower than this champion's. So by building this champion with resistance, you basically have a merciless set bonus implemented into this skill, because most of the time you will have more resistance than your target that you are attacking. And then on top of that, you're also placing a block revive. So in my opinion, that is absolutely crazy and one of the strongest skills in this game. So not only are they dealing damage while having resistance, the scary part is that they are hard to debuff. You cannot really steal their turn meter, cannot control them, cannot remove the buffs. So if you don't have enough accuracy, you will lose the control over this champion. That is not what you want. So like I said, now the substats people will chase now, right? Resistance plus attack and crit rate and speed, or resistance main stat chest pieces from Savage set or Lethal set, speed boots with resistance substats. All these combinations of stats are becoming more interesting now, only because of this champion, and I highly doubt that this will be the last one. I think there will be much more, also legendary champions at some point, and I can't wait to see what's coming next, right? Because this was definitely a thing that was missing in the game. Like I said, we had a damage dealer with attack and accuracy, which, Carnage. We had Embrace with HP and accuracy. We had Rotos with attack and HP. We had def and attack-based nukers. I think there's also one that scales of attack and HP, not quite sure, but you get what I'm saying. The only thing that was missing was the resistance nuker, and now we finally got one. And I don't think it will be the last one. So yeah, guys, think twice before you sell artifacts like this, right? With those resistance rolls. even though it might be, might have been a pain when you rode your gear and you were like, man, why did I roll, a double res? Why did I roll double res on this piece? That's terrible. What a shitty piece. But now I'm kind of happy that I kept it because that piece must be like 1 year old. And even then I was thinking like, you know what, I'm going to keep this because you never know, there might be a champion that will scale off resistance at some point, and then this type of gear has a purpose because it didn't really have a purpose until now. And yeah, so that's how the first resistance attack nuker could shake up Raid Shadow Legends. And if Plarium tunes this champion right, we might be entering an entirely new era of resistance type nukers, unstoppable forces. And yeah, let me know in the comments below. Do you think this is busted, or is it exactly what the game needed? And with that being said, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you enjoyed, please hit the like button. It really goes a long way. Also, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more raid content. The YouTube algorithm's going to suggest you a video that you might like right here, and see you in the next one.